Hi, my name's Chris Burgess, and today we're going to look at the Sonitus FX compressor in Sonar. There are a variety of presets you can choose from. Let's choose one. You can bypass the plugin with this button here. You can undo a single previous edit with this. There are actually two copies of this compressor you can use, and you can flip between them by clicking this. And you can reset to a one-to-one compression, which means no compression. Now let's take a quick look at how you enter data into this plugin. So you can click on the window. If you double click, you can enter the value on the keyboard, or you can click on the window and use the wheel, or you can hold down, click, and move the mouse. Or when there's a slider, you can just move the slider. Now all of these data entries windows have sliders except for ratio and knee, which I'll explain in a minute. Here you can see the transfer function on a graph with x-axis the input and y-axis the output, both measured from 0 to minus 60 dB, and it's dBFS, full-scale dB. So let's just remind ourselves what these different parameters mean. The threshold is the value, the input dB, above which compression takes place, or above which the plugin has any effect. The ratio is the ratio of input to output dB above threshold. So in fact, if I lower the threshold and change the ratio, you can see it change from, for example, 3 to 1 ratio, meaning that the input changes by 3 dB and the output changes by only 1 dB. And you can make this smaller than 1, which makes the compressor become an expander. The knee is the smoothness of the transition from no compression down here to compression up here. And in fact, you can go all the way to hard, which means that it's a very sharp transition, up to 30 dB. And the reason it's measured in dB is that what it is the measure along the x-axis of how long it takes to go from no compression to full compression. There's also a button here which takes you between normal and vintage just means that at the highest levels the ratio goes back to 1-to-1, which means that the highest volume music is unchanged, which makes the music sound more punchy. This gain is the output gain, which is settable here. The attack is the time before which the compression fully takes place once the signals have gone above threshold. And the release is a time until the compression goes back to 0 once the signal falls below threshold. So this compressor doesn't have any traces, for example, gain reduction traces that it shows. But we can compensate by adding a bus, routing the output of the audio to the bus, and then showing the waveform. And to show how the compressor works, I've recorded the first 8 bars of Dolly's Funeral by Tchaikovsky here. So let's just play the uncompressed version. And I want you to pay attention to how quiet the quietest notes are in this piece. So now, as I reduce the threshold, and the ratio, you see that the gain reduction meter shows that there's a reduction in gain here whenever this input goes above threshold. And I can compensate by increasing the gain. And now listen to the note at the end of the piece. It's about the same volume as the rest of the notes. So this compressor has a separate limiter which you can use to make sure that clipping never occurs. I've shown here what happens when you clip. The Sonar changes the color. And if I have this on, that'll never occur, even though it'll reach 0 dB. These lights up here turn red when clipping occurs if this is switched off, or when limiting occurs if it's switched on, so they have a different meaning depending on whether the limiter is on or off. Finally, TCR stands for Transient Controlled Release, and it simply does an automation of the release time around the chosen release to make it smoother. You just have to play with that and see if you like what it sounds like. So in this video I've demonstrated how to use the Sonitus compressor, including threshold, ratio, attack, and release. I've described the visuals of the device, including gain reduction meters and the transfer function. And it doesn't have any traces to show, but I showed how you can use Sonar to generate traces anyway. Thank you very much.